Welcome to the Dungeon Coach. I'm the Dungeon Coach. I'm going to help you lower that DC in your game by literally helping you with your game. Last week I introduced my new series, Dungeons and Dragons, Drills and Skills, and you guys had a bunch of questions, and now I got a bunch of answers. Apparently, too many answers. I totally got carried away answering your questions, and the first cut of this video was 50 minutes long. So what I've done for you guys to be more efficient is I've pinned the top comment with timestamps to every single question's topic so you can see what you're interested in. I just really loved answering these questions. This video is going to be very different than my normal D&D videos with less editing, and it'll be set up more like a podcast. So let me know if you like this more relaxed and conversational style. But this video is my idea to thank you guys for getting to 5,000 subscribers. In this video, you'll get to see exactly how I as a DM would handle a wide variety of over 20 different situations. I have no idea how this will go, but if this video does well, I'm going to use the comments in this video to make another video. But that's on you guys. First question comes from Jeb, and he asks, how can I get better at DMing faster? Honestly, when I first started DMing, I wish there was more videos just like this one when I was learning so I could hear how another DM would handle a wide variety of situations. So something that I did that you can do right now is after I read a question, pause the video, think how you would handle it, and then hear what my 2 cents are after. Not only will this create even more ideas that you could possibly use, but it lets you flex that DM muscle. Because thinking creatively is definitely something you can practice if you surround yourself in it. And by no means am I saying my ideas are the best method, but they will be outside the box. And I got a lot of duplicate questions from the last video, so some of these questions might pertain to your game too. Here we go. We got a question from Dastern. I'm a new DM and I'm running my first game. Could you tell me what are some of the best homebrew rules I should use or just roll with the basics for my first run? What a great homebrew question. So myself, when I was the first to DM, I was all player for only 3 times before jumping into the role of DM. Now, I'm a little crazy and I read through the player's handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster's Manual like crazy to really try and soak it all in. But I would say use the homebrew rules that make your life easier compared to the rules as written. Try not to bite off more than you can chew by implementing rules that you really haven't got a solid grasp on yet, and most likely your players won't know either. Because if your players know the rules as written, they can actually help you remember the rules too. So if your players and you want to implement a rule, you can actually use them to kind of help as a team remember all these rules. But I would encourage you to be that next level DM and soak in all those rules so that you don't need their help and you really truly do know the rules like the back of your hand. But only implement homebrew rules that would help you, not overwhelm you. And a little sneak peek here is my first rule in my homebrew combat video coming out this weekend is being able to implement homebrew rules mid-campaign. So don't be afraid of, I gotta pick them now. You can always implement homebrew rules or change up some rules mid-campaign. Next question comes from Chris C. How do we get our players to get more involved and invested in the game? And how do we make sure we focus on each individual PC? I do have a video on this. The second video I did on backstories is whatever backstories that they give me, I write it all out like a massive, murder spreadsheet thing where I see the big picture of where they come from, what's going on with each of the individual pieces, and try and tie them together. And I also try and pair them together. So if there's 2 players that have some similar backstories, I will try and think of a storyline that merges those together so that whenever I do that, it draws them in like, oh, this is our thing. Oh my God, we're connected. That's crazy. And within that though, you do, like you said, you want to have the individual moments too to let them shine. This happened to one of my players too. I noticed he hadn't got a chance in the spotlight for a while because the big side quest he had that was meant for him was this way and the party went that way. So I had to try and take those pieces, not just let them go to the wayside. That's still happening, and eventually I tied it back around to the main story. But during that time, I made sure to weave in little nuggets for him. He loved trade. He was making a leatherworking business. So I made sure that the place that they went to, hey, there's a big leatherworking business that they can teach you how to. So if I notice a player is slipping down, I will try and throw in little pieces for that player to keep them excited and engaged about the stuff that's happening in the world. The All-Star asks, I have a one-on-one duel between a player and an NPC coming up. Sweet. How do you keep the game interesting for the whole party during these spotlight moments when all the focus is on one player? A couple things come to mind, but the first one is in Critical Role where Grog got to square off in that fighting pit. You can always have the players support and cheer them on, but sometimes, like you're saying, that's just not enough. So try and throw some stakes involved for the rest of the players to make the outcome of that fight they get affected by. You could always have them bet money on the fight, but maybe something more is going on tied to their own backstories or the actual campaign itself. You could have some other moving pieces that the other players could interact with around the fight that could maybe give a bonus, whether it's sneakily or out in the open for the main player. And this might be cool. Maybe the fight itself is a huge distraction for the other players to accomplish something. So the one player gets their cool one-on-one moment while the other party has a task to accomplish too. Dakota Miller has a cool YouTube membership egg next to his name. Sweet. His question is, what would be your best tip for making a city-based parts adventure exciting for the PCs? And what kind of prep do you do for towns? Sneaky double question, Dakota. I'll answer the first part right now and the second one in the live stream tonight. How I make my cities exciting for my PCs is I first focus on the PCs. What do they have, whether it's people in their backstory that might be in the city, things they want to see that would be in the city, things they've been looking for. Listen to your players and what they're actually searching for to be able to put into your cities. I also try and think about what's been going on for the party. Has things been really stressful and I need to loosen it up with some sort of party atmosphere? Or have things been really relaxed and something crazy needs to happen in the city? And think about your big campaign overarching big bad evil guy or the other minions of his in the city. Are they doing something? Are they moving pieces around? Something like that. And then lastly, I think about the city itself. What cool stuff does the city have to offer? What's its different flavor or twist or spin compared to the next city or the other one? Time out. Okay, so this series is really fun for me to do and I love helping you guys. And from the feedback I've gotten from y'all, you seem to really like it. But YouTube seems to not think so. So the video that started this series performed lower than most any of my other videos. So I literally can't keep doing these if I want to grow this channel. But I think it might have been because I wasn't actually answering any questions in that video, and this video I am. So if you do like videos like this, then hit that like button and share it with a friend and I can answer y'all's questions too. Because if this video gets 500 likes in the next 4 days, I will do a follow-up video where I answer the questions in the comment section of this video. Ooh, Joe's got a good question. I call this quarterbacking. I have a mixed group of players and I'm having trouble with my veteran players taking over my new players and steamrolling their decisions. How can I encourage my new players to speak up and put the overbearing ones in timeout? I call this quarterbacking because D&D isn't football. There's not one quarterback that tells everybody else what to do. Everyone should have an equal voice. So one thing is if this really is a problem, I might put it out there in the open and actually say no quarterbacking. The first thing I'll do as a DM is advocate for that player. So as soon as one of those veteran players says like, oh, you should totally do this. I'm like, no. What would you do? You yourself shut down that player and let their voice be heard. Now, I'm not saying to be rude about this, and you could easily say something simple like, hey, no, let's see what he would do. Or if it's a metagaming situation and that character isn't even around the other character, shut that down too. Also, when you're talking and looking around the table, specifically look at that new player. Make sure to keep in mind, if you put a new player on the spot, they might freeze up. So make sure you facilitate and help them along their thought process. Not quarterbacking them and telling them what to do, just ask them what to do and help them run through the scenarios in their mind. But as usual with most out-of-the-game scenarios, I would personally talk to one-on-one with each of those veteran players because they should understand. But overall, as with any out-of-the-game problems, I would talk to those veteran players one-on-one and make sure they even realize what they're doing because they might not know it and they might just want to be moving things along because they really enjoy things that are going on and they're just saying too much. Be empathetic and nice about it and encourage them to help and set an example, whether it's through role play of their actual character, role playing, helping the other character. That's always cool. But a lot of times talking about it like that will squash it and let that new player over time get faster and faster and everything will be fine. Cameron Powell's question was super interesting, and basically what he wants to do is have his campaign go across 12 levels but really squish it down to where they end the campaign at level 6. He'd give them ability score improvements and feats at those half levels, so basically they'd be level 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, ending the campaign at 6. So what do I think about that? I love it. So many times campaigns get out of control when you start getting around that level 10, 11, 12, and beyond. The power of your spellcasters gets crazy, and the things your players can do can break most puzzles or other things you try and throw at them. It's a lot easier as a DM to make the world feel more threatening when your players are only level 6. You don't have to throw demon lords, ancient dragons, and demigods at them. But as far as balancing encounters, I have a live stream that's already out and a video coming out soon of how I custom balance encounters. So when your players are level 4, they're going to be a little bit stronger than a normal level 4 because you're giving them these like half level upgrades. So just keep that in mind and you get able to beef up your monsters just a little bit more. All you need to do as a DM is keep ratcheting up the tension and what's at stake over time. They don't need to be fighting crazy difficult things because they're not that powerful themselves. Because the world should feel dangerous and alive for level 4 and 5 players, ending at 6, not having some massive world-ending story. So I totally love it, and basically just remember that your players are a little stronger than the average level 4, 5, and 6 character. Next question is from Intelligence 14, Wisdom 2, and he basically wants to introduce the BBEG to his PCs without them knowing he's evil and making it too obvious. All you gotta do here, my friend, is foreshadowing. I want to do a whole video on this, but basically have little bitty clues, and they don't have to be big, but they have to be big enough to where once they do find out what actually is happening, they can look back on it and be like, oh my gosh, I should have seen it coming. This could be weird mannerisms he has, things he says, things that he keeps around him. What NPCs surround him and who does he work for? What do the players think his goal is and what is his goal actually? Maybe let your players catch him in a small little white lie or something that's iconic about this character they find in the middle of somewhere that it shouldn't be. Basically think about any of those classic murder mysteries or CSI stuff where they find these little clues. So you as the DM can control what little breadcrumbs those are. Time out. Guys, you gotta turn on that notification bell. Because if I do use the comments in this video for the next one or other videos that I do, I'll be using the first comments I get. But don't worry, I got you covered this time because tonight I'm doing a live stream where I'll continue these questions. So if I don't get to your question in this video, then check out the live stream tonight, 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. But if you're from the future right now, then check out the link down in the description. Stephen Orr has a question about narration and doing better at describing rooms and cities. The first thing here is you have to realize that this is a weakness of yours, which you've already done. And I've worked with the DM in the past before that knew that they had the worst descriptions. So all I told them to do is that whenever you have your players going to a certain location that you know they're going to, write down an extra little, 2 lines of a description to kind of help you embellish on. If you know you're not gonna be able to just make something up on the fly, write those 2 lines down so that when you enter in the city, you can say those 2 things and then kind of freestyle it from there. Get the ball rolling. Another quick bonus tip is trying to include a lot of the senses. What do they see? What do they hear? What do they smell? And another thing I try and do sometimes is what do they feel? Like what's the general feeling you feel like? Like, is it kind of a nervous atmosphere? Is this kind of a sketchy place? Or is it everybody kind of excited? What's the emotion of the people around it so the players kind of understand what the vibe is? Sean Card says, congratulations on 5,000 plus subscribers in just 6 months. Thanks, man, I appreciate it. His question is, he's designing an encounter with were-rats, but he's adding extra character class features onto them to make them more powerful. And he doesn't know how to check their new CR rating. In 2 weeks, dude, I literally have a full-blown CR breakdown video. So my quick tip for you till then is if you give them 1 huge feature or maybe 2 smaller features, I don't want you to go crazy racking your brain on this, but this is what I did to normal monsters that I added cool stuff to. I just upped their CR by 1 and knew that that was probably highballing it, so the encounter was actually probably gonna be a little easier. But the most important part to be that next level DM is what you do after the fight's already over. That might sound weird, but you need to take a big step back, look at that were-rat, look at how much you gave it and how hard it was supposed to be for your players, and then see what actually happened. Over time, you'll get a really good sense for not only what your players can handle, but how much you can beef up these monsters. But ultimately, stick around for that video, Sean. I got you covered. Wesley Pelton wants help with creating a colossal monster that this party has to take down somehow. In my head, I want the monster to be so big that it basically is the battle map. Oh, wow. Wesley, that is a next level homebrew monster that's an entire battle map. That's awesome. I've never done a battlefield map monster, although I am now. So what I did for my big huge boss was make him extremely slow, but he hit like a truck to where if you took this damage, you might die in 1 hit. It was crazy. That's kind of what I wanted to have it be at. 15 movement speed, and it could not do opportunity attacks, which I referenced in my combat rules video part 1 about big slow monsters like this. So if you got hit, you got decimated. And when my players were first getting hit, they thought it was overpowered or ridiculous, but then they finally figured out a way to work around it. And again, that's kind of like the mechanics of encounters to make your players think, almost like it's a puzzle encounter combat situation. But they would run in, hit it, and get out. And it would just be chasing after them, destroying the battlefield in its wake. The ground beneath it started cracking, and so the battlefield was getting eroded over time as the monster was destroying it. But for you, since your battlefield is the monster, here's some things that are just popping in my head. You can have different parts of the battle map be different parts of it, and if they go to those spots, this almost feels like a video game level, and you destroy the certain spot and it stops a certain ability. I don't know what you're picturing in your head, if it's going to be like a bug or a reptile or something, but the different spots or these auras or zone-wide effects could be deactivated if they go kill certain parts of this massive creature that I guess they're on, if you want them to be on this thing, or if you want it to be the size of a battle map and they have to move around it. That might be interesting too, and different sections of it do different things. Like up top where its arms are could have some sort of earthquake type effects, and the tail has some sort of dexterity throw sweeping type effect. But the biggest thing I can think of is make sure it goes all the time. Don't just have it have one initiative and then the players, and then it goes. There's a whole video I want to do on running combats versus one thing. I think so many dungeon masters out there say, don't have your players fight only one thing. You can definitely do it, but you have to give and load up more actions into this thing so that it actually stands a chance action economy wise. What I've done in the past before is roll 2 initiatives for that one creature and it goes on both of those initiatives. Or if you want to go crazy, what I might do for this creature is it would go after every player. And if the players don't think that's fair, this is a gigantic freaking monster. There is no rules for this thing. After one player goes, you go. I don't care what their initiative are. Let them roll initiative so they get their order or whatever. But the monster goes in between each of the players, and it's just constantly doing something, right? That might be a way to do it. And if you do that, then I might back off a little bit on the different ads that come in because that might be too much. So it's a balancing act of if you want to have extra monsters running around, or if you truly want it to be just versus this one thing. Which that would basically be like legendary actions, right? But you could structure it spread out across the entire battlefield. That'd be crazy. You need some sort of zone-wide effects, dexterity saving throws, strength saving throws, maybe some sort of gas or breath type situation comes in, constitution saving throw, environmental shifts should change. Mine would destroy the battlefield, so you could definitely have this huge thing change the battlefield as it's stomping around. Man, this seems cool. All right, next question from Homebrew. He's asking basically, how do you make your players stay honest to themselves? Like when a player either accidentally or knowingly, that's a really crappy player, cheats the game and maybe doesn't keep track of their spell slots correctly, or uses an ability and doesn't mark it down how many key points they have as a monk or something, and they kind of use an extra one, stuff like that. So I've seen advice be given on this is that if a DM notices the player cheating, then they should punish them in in-game ways. I usually tend to stay away from that. I would just talk to the player afterwards. Something I've done for myself is if I actually notice it, which as a DM, it's very hard because you got plenty of stuff happening on this side of the screen, much less keeping track of your player stuff. So there is a level of trust there to make sure your players are doing the right thing. But if I have noticed something like that, I don't take care of it right then. I'll talk to the player afterwards about that. So in the moment, I might be like, come on, man. But afterwards, I'll talk to that player and be like, hey, you really got to make sure you keep track of your stuff. Be nice about it, but try not to beat around the bush too much and just be straight up that it kind of looks like you're cheating, and I don't want people to get that vibe because I don't think you are. Or do I? Like I said before, these one-on-one conversations really do go a long way. But if I still notice the players doing it and they're on my radar now, then I actually will keep track of those monk key points and see what they're actually doing. And a second follow-up conversation of the same thing will be a lot more stern and to the point. Because you as the DM need to protect the experience of all the rest of the players who are doing what they're supposed to do. So what I've done before is if a player is like, oh no, I forgot this ability, hold on. No, that's not what it would be. It actually would be this. Sorry guys. And to reward good behavior, I've given that player inspiration before. Now, that's not normally what I use inspiration for, but I think you should reward positive behavior to show the rest of the players, oh, I should do this thing. Because if it ever did get to the point where I had to actually punish a player with an in-game thing to be able to like slap him on the wrist or something, I feel like I would just remove that player from the game. Come on, players, you gotta act right. There was also a part 2 to this question, but I'll take care of that in the live stream. And that question leads me to this question from Studio 502. He's DMing for a group of 5 players, and 4 of them are really into D&D and would love a weekly meeting to play. But the last player, who loves D&D too, is not invested enough if you compare to the other players and is not really okay with the idea of meeting once a week. He basically goes on to ask if they should make 4 players and have 1 player have some sort of character that can come and go and not be there every week. Myself personally, I'm so invested into this game, and whenever I DM, I go all in. Probably too much, but hey, it's the experience for the players. And if my other players are all in too, and it's 1 DM and 4 of these all in players, and then there's 1 player that's just kind of not, ultimately my initial gut reaction is just you run with 4 players. 4 players is plenty, 4 players is awesome. You would have a great time. They're invested, you're invested. I think that would be the ideal situation for those players and yourself. Now, that other player, if this is your friend and all of y'all really want him to play and you're okay with him not being there and being flaky and all that kind of stuff, then sure. But that would have to literally be, I would talk to each individual player and be like, hey, are you sure that you want this person? Because there's going to be times this might be weird, or there's going to be times where, oh, he's here now, or oh, he's not here. It's going to make your life pretty hard, especially if you're balancing an encounter and you don't know if he's going to be there or not. The difference between balancing an encounter for 4 players versus 5 is a lot. But you could totally have this character be some sort of soul trapped inside of a lamp or something, like a genie, and you rub on it and you don't know if it's going to come out or not. or maybe he's trapped between dimensions and sometimes he's there and sometimes he's not. Even like what they've done on Critical Role with Pike, how sometimes she's not there for her real life work reasons, understandably. So there's been time where she's done this like heavenly astral projection type thing where her body's there, but just like an angelic version. But myself personally, I have kind of had this happen before, where in the middle of playing and the sixth player of this group really couldn't commit to the time slot anymore. So I talked to that one player one-on-one, we came to an understanding, and I wanted to give him a big epic send-off. The other 5 players had no idea, but in a big combat with one of the recurring villains, I killed that player in front of the rest of the group, and everyone was shocked and floored. And then they found out later that, oh, this player no longer can be able to play with us anymore, so they kind of understood, and it was actually a pretty good feel at the table. It was almost like a goodbye to that character as they said their big final send-off. But again, my stance is you as the DM has to protect the experience of everyone, and I would not sacrifice the experience of 4 players for 1. HC Magic asks, how do you feel about... Wait a second. How did you know this was coming up in a video? How did you know this? Moving on. Joseph Hartline asks 2 quick questions. What is the best way to tell your DM, hey, I'd like to run into this at some point? Is it better to talk to them in-game that I'm looking for this, or talk to them out-of-game? Yes. Here's what I mean by that. I would talk to the DM out-of-game first, and this really is a session 0 type thing. I talk about this in session 0 of what do you guys want to do? Like, what kind of game do you want to play? What adventure type thing have you not done in D&D before in the past that you would like to do? Like, and tie that into your character's goal. If you really want to do something, have that be your character's goal, and that's a great way of your DM knowing, hey, I want to do this thing. But this doesn't have to be your one main goal. If this is something your character's looking for, try and roleplay that in-game. In character, talk to the rest of the characters about this thing that you're looking for. Trust me, your DM will pick up on it. But this is totally something that you can talk to your DM about as well. I love getting updates from my players about what they want and what they're looking for. One of my players was very particular about a huge list of stuff he was looking for. So in that next big town they came up to, I made sure there was some of that there. But DMs, don't just give your players everything they ask for. You gotta make them work for it. And I will answer this second question is, what's the new mascot's name? That's not for me to decide. I want to throw this out there to the dungeon crew and see what you guys think. My initial thoughts is to have some sort of acronym that's DC, like Dragon Champion, but that's not really a name. Doug Charles. So comment down below what you think the name should be, and I'll make a big community post and we'll all vote on it. Rocket Duck asks, my players are kind of aimless currently, and they have a couple of quests that they've been given, but how do I urge the importance of completing those quests? Couple of things popping in my mind that I'll fire off. Tie it to their backstory so it actually means something to them so that they want to go do it in the first place. But the biggest thing you can do here is add some sort of tension or timer onto this thing. That there's something that's about to happen, or this is in danger, or this thing's about to come. Add some sort of time constriction there, and that's automatically gonna make them have to like, we gotta go. But another thing this could be, and this isn't a jab at you, Rocket Duck, is if you as a DM have not made it clear that this world is alive and breathing and things are happening around, and if you don't go to these things, the world's still advancing and you don't have all the time in the world and you haven't brought that hammer down on them yet, then maybe they don't know that. So now I'd say it's on you to make them feel that. If they don't, if they just take their time and they have all these different things and they just go through the motions and it's fine, whatever, and they eventually get to the first thing, maybe they get there maybe in time, but have something be like, oh God, you just missed it. This person just died, or this thing just left, or they actually ran away with it. They got it too soon. Now, let's go. So change the state of where they're going to, or change the state of the other things that happen, and by the time they get there, it's already done. And I got your other questions in a live stream. Here's a great follow-up question after that last one. Lilo Polo asks, what's your opinion on motivating players by making enemies actively do stuff? To clarify, he uses a calendar in his game and sets dates of some kind that happen while the players aren't there, and he's basically had the campaign almost be lost because the players are too slow at catching up. This is taking the tip I just gave and going to the extreme. So in the same thing, I like what I just said, I would have some sort of things happen before a campaign ending fire under their butts, and have multiple times to kind of make them realize like, hey, this bad thing's happening. And if they keep not listening to it, then yeah, bigger punishments start happening, bigger, and when I say punishment, I mean like cause and effect. Things in the world is changing based off of these decisions that they're making, or I guess not making, or making too slowly. But if your players keep dragging their feet and taking their time, then yes, super bad things should happen. But if I've noticed this happening in my players and it gets to the point where this just keeps happening, I've kind of stopped, and usually at the end of a session, been like, guys, like, What's the deal? Y'all really seem to not care that the village to the east is burning. Why is that? Sometimes talking to your players and getting inside their heads helps you understand these things. And I just thought of this, but one of the biggest mistakes I made early on was putting too many fires out in the world for my players to constantly have to go put out. Now, they weren't literal fires, but there was always something to do and the players never had a chance for downtime. And I did a whole video on downtime and how awesome it can be, but I never put that into my game. But once I finally let my players, like, they succeeded, awesome, and they have some time, and then another thing happens. That ended up being much better. Josco Foz has a really interesting question. Can you think of a new way to make real player skills part of a game, like a bard who actually plays a guitar? So I'm sorry, Josco, but ultimately, I would never do this. I'm not trying to rain on your parade because I totally see how that would be really interesting. Like, I can solve a Rubik's Cube pretty quickly, and I think it'd be a pretty sweet puzzle if I'd come up to it and the DM out from behind the screen threw down a Rubik's Cube and I had to solve it real time for some effect to stop on the battle map. That'd be pretty sweet. Now, I'm speaking from experience here on this one because I did actually go to Barnes & Noble and buy one of those weird puzzle things, and I threw it down in the middle of the table, and they had to solve it to get this big fire spinning thing to stop moving. And after it was all said and done, I will most likely never do that again. Biggest reason why is it absolutely kills your player's immersion. I want my players to be sitting around a table, but not actually even think that they're sitting around a table. I want them to be in this world, thinking as their character. And if I literally pull them out of it to do something and execute some physical thing or at the table, that goes the opposite direction. But how I could see this being done is if this was a one-shot of some kind and you wanted to add some sort of thing that each of the players had to do, and maybe in the encounters you actually threw in physical props as well, or even having get up to the table and run around the house for some sort of scavenger hunt, you could do that too. But all of that feels very board gamey, which can be fun, and you could totally do in a one-shot, but I personally would not put that into my campaign. And I feel bad because now I just read the comment of Josco saying, love the channel, by the way. In my humble opinion, your channel is the best for D&D tips and creative ideas. So I'm sorry for just raining on your creative idea. But I hope you see where I was coming from. Now I got 3 people asking pretty much the same question. Gene Cox, 12 Butts, and Robert Gray. They want to know some tips and tricks for playing D&D one-on-one or one-on-two with 2 players. I've ran multiple sessions one-on-one with players for either downtime stuff or sometimes extended periods of time if they couldn't make it to a session. Now that's a whole nother story. So for one-on-one, the coolest part is that player gets to do literally everything. They can be the center stage all the time, and the entire story is custom to them. They would tell me what they wanted to do, I would tell them what happened, and we'd keep going back and forth like this until I felt like a check needed to be made. A lot of times this was done apart from each other, and I really didn't feel like running off an entire combat with one person with an actual grid and FaceTiming them or something of what to do. So it was, I pretty much ran all the combats like a skill challenge, and they would say what they were doing, they'd make a check, and there'd be a DC, and they'd see how it goes, and I would describe this thing as they went. And personally, I like 1 player better than 2 players because 2 players I feel like is in an awkward spot in the middle, so I totally understand where you guys are coming from with this question. And here's something I've seen done before that worked pretty well is give each of those players a companion of some kind. Now, don't have them run 2 full-blown characters. I think this is companions and followers. There's entire documents out there on this, and in fact, I'll be doing a video as soon as it comes out about Stibble's Codex for companions and stuff. I think that'll be a pretty sweet resource. There's an entire thing in there about very simple companions that can follow you along the way. That can be a really cool thing for those 2 players to have, so there's more pieces for them to interact and move around. And this saves you from having to insert a DM PC into the mix, because that's the whole thing. And for Robert Gray's specific question about wondering if the characters would be powerful enough, you can do something crazy, and this seems like a good place to do it at, is the Gestalt multi-classing method. This is literally when each of your players, or if there's just one, picks 2 classes and they literally get everything from both classes as they level up. So if they picked Barbarian and Sorcerer at level 1, they would have all the features of both of those. And when they level up, they'd have the level 2 features from both of those, and you would have some pretty cool characters. Would they be brokenly powerful? Yes. But if there's only 1 or 2 players, that's kind of cool. And I have another double repeat from Francisco Tapia and 8 Ounce asking about mass combat. How I've personally ran mass combat in the past is a huge mega skill challenge. And if you can't tell by now, if you know me well enough, I love me some skill challenges. The biggest one I've ever done was they needed 8 wins before 3 losses, and this was spread out across multiple sections of the city. I do have an entire video that I want to dedicate this of how to actually run this and different things you can do to skill challenges to better fit them for mass combat, but I feel like that's the best way to do it. You could implement an entire new rule system from some wargaming games, but I feel like that would just be too complicated and muddy things down. And if you ran mass combat how it should be as a combat, it would take forever. And at the end of the day, you're trying to tell a cool story, and you can definitely get a war feeling across with a skill challenge. In my second skill challenge video, I actually give a rundown of what an entire city being attacked by werewolves would look like in a skill challenge. But if you combine skill challenges with my DC video and all the different DCs you can do, that's kind of what I do for mass combat, but that would be a whole video. Another double question from Rivers RPG and GoGo Gadget Ninja is, how do you handle groups of 8 or more? Me personally, I don't. But for real, the largest amount of players I ever had is 8, and it does get pretty crazy, so I know what you're talking about. As soon as we got that 8th player, I had a conversation with all the players to let them know and get them all on the same page about what we're dealing with here. So a cool idea I came up with is players 7 and 8 that had just joined the game, they wove their characters together to almost act as one. It was pretty cool to see, and I gave them some homebrew abilities, but they literally rolled 1 initiative and acted as one. I also told everybody if combat happened, you better be ready to go. But for those huge groups, how I handle a lot of the combat, social encounter, and exploration was something I call a 1-round skill challenge. I know, there's those skill challenges again, and in about 3 weeks or so, I'm doing an entire video about 1-round skill challenges. The coolest part is this system lets everybody come together and be a part of it, but it hits that middle area and it doesn't take super long, and it's not just all baked into one roll. But the hardest thing as a DM is you gotta take a big step back and make sure they're all engaged. So if one of those players starts slipping through the cracks, you gotta have an NPC talk to them directly, or during combat, make somebody attack them. Try and make sure that they feel like a part of it, because it's really easy to get washed down with 8 players. But as long as the players and you are on the same page and understand what situation you're in, it can work. Repeat question from Michael Riggs and David Faro. They want to know about magic weapons and armor that grow and scale with their characters. I absolutely love this idea, and I had an entire video, this was a while ago, about sentient items and how players can unlock different levels to the sentient item and unlock cool things that it can do, and even its personality more through role-playing and leveling up with it. At my tables, I always use a bonus level up system, and every time my players level up, I give them some cool extra bonus feature with however big or small it is. And for one of my players, they had a sword from their great-grandfather that they absolutely loved and they were never going to part with, so thematically, their bonus level up perks, I kind of baked into that sword. So this sword that he had, that I never had any intention of it having any extra bonus powers, as the game went on, I kept buffing it with these bonus powers, and then he ended up with this really awesome sword that was deeply connected to his backstory. Last question is going to be from Jan Hendricks. Out of combat, me and my players have a great time role-playing and telling a story. But in combat, my players' role-playing shrinks down to a minimum, and we tend to only call out the action and the dice rolls. How can we improve this? I personally find these windows to be more descriptive and bring them into this combat in between dice rolls. So as the DM, I'll be moving the pieces around as I describe what's happening, grab my dice and describe what's about to happen, roll the dice, and then explain how the damage would roll out. And I do the same exact thing for my players. Whenever they describe what they do, however flavorful or not, they roll that dice, and while the dice is rolling, while they're adding up their damage, whatever, I'll describe these big sweeping blows or whatever's happening to kind of keep the spice up the combat for the other players and that player as well. So instead of just waiting for the roll to happen and then have it be a hit and then he's rolling the damage, 17, okay, 17, like, instead of that, I would in between those moments of downtime, dead time, I guess, describe what's happening. And of course, the quote from the great Matt Mercer, when someone kills something, ask them, how do you want to do this? And then they can add their own spice to the description of how they kill this thing. Time out. I just want to stop and say thank you to my new YouTube members and patrons from this last week. Literally every single dollar helps, and we're now at over 100 supporters for this channel. All that support lets me try and streamline things here so I have more time to keep doing these videos. Because I'm not gonna lie, creating consistent content like this with a newborn is hard. But I'm gonna keep grinding for you guys and make it happen. So again, thank you. I hope you guys like this and enjoy this bonus video. And if you do, please share it around, like it, leave a comment with your own question that I possibly would answer in the next video. Subscribe right here so you don't miss my next video, which could be huge, of my Homebrew Combat Rules Part 2. Don't forget to join in on my double giveaway that I'm doing, one for subscribers and one for my YouTube members and patrons. Link to my Patreon's right here, and that YouTube join button is down below. Thank you again so much, and I hope this helped you guys stay creative and think outside that box. Peace.